Alright, we're good. Webcam is like doing crazy exposure things, but that's fine. Right, okay. So essentially what we're gonna do here is we're gonna spend 2 hours with Dallas and we're gonna take the truck all the way from the fixed setup for Chicago and we're gonna hopefully build it into something that should be somewhat decent for open setup. And by somewhat decent, I mean that isn't near as loose as what we're starting with, because this is not easy. The reason we were doing this was that like it's a track that we've done recently. It's also peak next week, so I've driven it, not in the truck, but at least in Cup. So hopefully, kind of, there's less time spent just kind of learning how to drive, and there's more time spent just getting accurate ideas in terms of setup. But yeah, it's kind of harder than I thought it was gonna be, just because it's bizarrely difficult to drive, to be honest. I don't know if you guys watching have the link for the timesheet, but I will grab it and put it in chat for you. And that should work. If it doesn't, just let me know. What we're going to do, because we've got Dallas here as well, is we should be able to put us both on different setups or slight variations to give you an idea of kind of what's doing what and where's better and so on. So what we're going to do to start with is we're just going to do 10 together as a pair on the fix, just to show you kind of how it drives and so on. So we'll do that now. Also, say hello, Dallas.
What's up?
Dallas is doing Road to Pro with us, and he's essentially the one doing all the setups for us. And he runs pretty good when he doesn't get wrecked out, so his knowledge should be helpful. Do you want to lead or shall I lead?
Yeah. I'll lead so that you can see how loose it is.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, this fixed set is really, really loose. At least in the weather that we're messing around in.
Well, I think the problem with it is though, is like, even in this weather, for a fixed set, it shouldn't drive this bad.
Probably not, but we'll try and stay away
Even
from
in
that.
cold weather, I think this might struggle.
It depends on what it was built for, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I'm guessing afternoon.
yeah,
Oh,
but then
not me.
you can cut
You
that
want me
if
to
you
run
want.
the
I
EP?
don't mind.
Alright.
I'm not gonna cut it just because it's easier to get repeatability without cutting it. But essentially with the fixed, the big issue with it is it's really, really loose coming off corner, and it's really loose when you're getting on throttle. Which you're not going to see immediately, but after maybe like 5 or 10 laps, it's going to be really obvious. But there's definitely more speed to be found in this as well, so hopefully we'll show how to get that out of it, as well as making it a lot nicer to drive. Also for this track specifically, when you come off of 2, I don't know if it's actually true, but this is definitely how it feels to me. When you transition across that last seam to the highest groove, it's almost like the track flattens off and basically always tries to kick you around.
31.72.
Ah, you didn't miss the beginning. We literally just started. We're just doing a 10 lap run on fixed right now to show you kind of how that drives.
The big thing with coming off 2 at Chicago is just being as low as you can for as long as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, okay,
And I mean,
loose
that
already.
applies for quite literally any car, so...
Yeah, it really does. The longer you can stay lower here, in literally everything on exit, it's pretty much always better. Hey man, how's it going? That's 4, by the way.
31.84.
You can, like, I don't know if you can see it, like, in the wheel, but right on exit, it tries to kick around. And the fix basically is melting the right rear tire. So this only actually gets worse the longer you go.
31.84.
Like if you look at the 20 lap run in the timesheet, you'll see you can kind of tell when it gets particularly difficult to drive because the variance in times gets huge. Yeah, Jadavan. I can't remember when that was. This is what we're doing right now is basically we're just doing kind of a how-to on setups. But we'll have more racing tomorrow night. The super late models. You know what's interesting is that following you, it doesn't feel near as loose as it did on its own.
Well, yeah, I think that's just part of the iRacing
You look crazy
physics
loose
model.
though.
I am. Wheel is straighter now than it was with my Pro set.
Okay, you can see it a bit more in mine now. I'm having to actually count stuff. And I mean, the best thing you can do, I would say, with something like this, if you just have to drive a car like this, is to just be really nice on the throttle. To avoid that, basically.
I don't know if it's necessarily considered good driving etiquette to do it, but when the drive off is that bad, you either have to way back up entry or like completely send it in to burn off the right front. Because if you back it up and you don't do it too much, like Atlanta Harvick style, then what happens is you basically just have literally too much turn off the corner.
Yeah. What he said definitely holds true. I'm of the preference of just rolling in easier. Although I do have a tendency to overdrive the entry. That's 10 we can pull down.
32.68.
But yeah, you can just drive in deeper if you want. But that's not what
now that we're done, I can elaborate on it. But like the Harvick style really only works at Atlanta because of how bad the grip will get.
Yeah.
But at places like Chicagoland, like a lot of times with the wear patterns you'll see on the right side, if you're wearing the right rear more now, that's probably not good and it's going to hurt you long run. So there's a few, like if you can't fix it with setup, you can fix it with driving by driving in deep into the corner but being easy off, just to kind of even out the wear. And sometimes it pays off long run, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on the track, but it is one of those things as a driver you can do to help alleviate it at least.
You can kind of work around it a little bit. And in terms of fixed setup and stuff, you don't really have any choice. And also, will this be on YouTube afterwards? Yes, it will. Kind of restricted to sort of 2-hour window tonight, but that's okay. We should be able to get a lot done. Dallas, just looking at like the garage screen, what would you kind of say is like an obvious first thing that you would definitely change on this? I know you mentioned about air pressures before.
Well, see, yeah, that's the thing. I'd say the biggest thing, just in terms of with how bad the handling is, I don't even think we should look at speed at the moment. But when I look at handling, that air pressure split, those left side air pressures, you might as well be driving on flats, because like the larger split you have, especially, or more like the lower the left sides are, the more it hurts like the long run handling of it. Because once the right rear and right side tires give up, that tire split just hurts you more than it helps you. So I'd say ideally you probably want to start with like, I don't know, probably 10 pounds max.
As a start, yeah.
And the right sides you're always going to want to be minimum. That's just kind of the meta right now. It produces the most grip for the longest amount of time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that. That in general, well, okay, for mile and a halfs where you're pretty restricted on right side air pressures, usually you can only go down to about, I want to say anywhere between 42 and 45. 45 is where it is for a lot of tracks. There's a couple where you have extremely high right side minimums. I think Vegas is one of them. For some reason, I remember that Vegas in the Cup Series you have to run like 50 something.
I think it's like 52.5.
Yeah, so it's really extreme. I would agree and say that you can't really go wrong if you start off with 10-pound split. I wouldn't
See,
always stay there, but it's
yeah,
definitely not
but
a bad place to start.
as a baseline starting point, that's always a good thing because personally, what I found with the tire split is like it's easier to mess it up than it is to get it right. So you're
Yeah.
typically better off just being conservative with it, and you really can never go wrong with a 9 or 10 pound split.
Yeah, that's true. I
So
would
it
definitely agree on that as well.
yeah, it basically just eliminates a potential issue with the car and allows you to focus on other parts of it.
I mean, it's the so when the right okay, we got a question. So when right side pressures are higher, do you still use that same rule of 10-pound split? Beginning with yes, but okay, in terms of truck, I actually don't know. With the Cup Series stuff, in general, I usually run my left side air anywhere between 30 and 40 for a mile and a half trek. I would say start there. Like so even if it's 50 on the rights, I would try starting out at 40s on the left.
Yeah, generally, um, all the pro sets I've built or whatever for the truck over the last year or so, it's always been pretty much a 10 pound starting point, and depending on what build we're in, it might go to 13 for like a very unique track that we can luckily get away with it at, or like with some of the shorter tracks, you'll go down to like a 7 or 8, depending on the track.
Yeah, I
But in
would.
in
Oh,
general,
okay, yeah,
10 is always an accepted standard on any of the cars.
yeah, pretty
You know,
much.
it's the same tire model, so
Yeah, it's more. There's more crossover than there are differences going between the three top level stuff. I'm pretty sure they're all on the same tire. One other thing I would say is that for shorter tracks, so places like when I say Phoenix, I feel like Phoenix and Martinsville and stuff, you can have really low right side air pressures. Usually starting around,
Pocono.
yeah, Pocono. Pocono is a bit weird though.
Well,
Pocono is low but
Pocono's
not like,
minimums, they're like 32
yeah,
minimums.
which is
But that can
I would
kind of
still
throw
start
things
there.
off. Like if you haven't worked with them a lot, I know it always throws me off. I don't know what the accepted standard is nowadays, but in general, the lower you can run them, the better.
Yeah.
You'll know when you're too low if you're just constantly loose, no matter
Well,
what.
I was gonna say that for like really short treks, I want to say around like 25 as a starting point is probably not bad. But for mile and a half,
Well,
definitely
28
minimums.
rights are the minimums for short tracks on the truck.
Oh, okay. I feel like Martinsville you can go lower. Maybe you can't.
You might be able to, yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Now, a
But
place like Martinsville, you can get away with an even smaller split because it's a
yeah.
flat track.
Well, and you get less right side build as well. But in terms of other
Yeah.
set and forgets on here, we can definitely go up on camber and literally max out everything always. So on truck it's 1.9 rear and 6 in the front. And also same as with most other stuff is maxing out casters as well. Which is already there. And run heights have changed a little bit, but not too much. I always for link slack, a decent place to start is always on like you can either really do well, you can do like kind of three things really. You can either try and mess around trying to get the bar to load and unload at certain points in the corner, which I think has potential, but I've never managed to make it work. And the other two is you can start it with like just one click of preload, so it's kind of always loaded. And then the last is basically just max out the preload. For this, I'm just going to start with it with just like one click in it. Why didn't you set the canvas to 6? I did. I think they reset themselves. There you go. So, and another thing I would say is toe. On this, you're allowed to have quite a decent sort of range of adjustment. You can see we've got -5 and +5. In this car and Xfinity, I would always try and keep these equal. Well, not equal, but like parallel with each other. In the Cup, you've got a different rule where you're basically allowed no right rear toe, and in that you can use the left to kind of tighten the car up some. It's a bit of a preference thing. If you're struggling in Cup, I would just max out the left and work around that. But in these, I would always run in parallel with as much as you can get. So you can see that you can only go to -5.
Yeah, you're talking about rear toe, I assume.
Yeah, rear toe.
Yeah, the biggest thing, especially with a place like Chicagoland, is you want as much skew as you can get with that rear toe, because when you run, I don't know, if you run it almost reversed, you'll be really fast for a few laps, but once the tires give up and it's, I guess, becoming more aero grip than it is mechanical grip, at that crossover point, now all of a sudden you're extremely loose. So the more
Yeah.
skew you can run, the better speed you're gonna have for longer.
By max, you mean more positive. On the left side of the car, positive. On the right side, negative. Because basically what that does is it will say like the direction of travel is forwards like that. It will skew the car out like that. And basically, you get more downforce from it. You get side force, and you can go faster. So yeah, negative right sides, positive left, and actually the same is true for Cambo, which is kind of funny.
The biggest thing, like, you'll know when you don't have enough skew if you, like, it's a exit of the corner deal where you'll come off the corner and you won't just slide or be loose, you'll just snap and be spinning.
Right.
So when you get that kind of thing going, it's usually or likely a skew problem.
The other thing with skew is that it's affected by track bar and it's affected by track bar split. So in theory, the most skew that you can get is right. This is where I was confused about this for like a million years. The difference between skew and just outright rear steer, because they're not the same. The max skew you can get is with a 4-inch split in terms of track bar. And basically, that's because the track bar heights are referenced around 8-inch starting heights in the rear. Now, the rear basically hits the track when it gets to roughly around between 3.5 inches on the right rear, like offset height, and 4. So, starting from the 8-inch height, you can only get 4 to 4.5 inches of travel before basically you like the rear can't travel anymore. So if you think if the right rear track bar mount starts here and the left one starts here, then if it drops 4.5 inches and the difference is 4.5 inches, when it drops down and goes flat, the bar should be parallel with the ground, and that should give you the most skew. Now, there is another effect in terms of rear steer, and that can kind of, I don't want to say offset, but it can sort of muddy the picture a bit, in the sense that so for plate tracks, it's common to run 15 on the left side and 8 on the right. And basically what that does is it steers the body the opposite way to how you would normally want. And in doing so, it gives you less drag and you get more straight line speed. Now, if you do the opposite, you get more drag, but it can give you more corner speed. But for this, what we'll do is we'll just start with 6 and 10, and we'll go from there. You'll also see that sometimes you'll have to reset your toe. And the other thing about track bar is it's massively influential in terms of both entry and exit of the corner. The more positive split you have, so left to right, the more when you get on the gas, the car's going to want to rotate. So if you're struggling a ton with on-throttle rotation, you can start trimming the right side track bar down to help you with that. Dallas, I'm going to show you what I'm going to go out on.
All right.
Did you make any other changes? Because I just did the cambers, the casters, the toes, and the track bar down to 10. Oh, and the air pressure.
You want to do shocks at 32?
Yeah, actually, let's do that too. You can mess around with shocks, but the gains are small, and in general, a good place to start is 32.
Yeah, it's kind of like the tire split goes, where if they're maxed out, it's one less thing that you really have to worry about because it's easier to get them wrong than it is to get them right.
Basically. We talked a bit about truck arm mounts before. Do you want to say something on that, or are we good?
Well, I mean, I think it honestly probably depends on how you like to drive your trucks or whatever. I think with the way things are right now, you don't have much of a choice. There's always kind of one way to do it, even though there really isn't, but that's the way it looks like with, you know, other people putting out stuff that's really good. But in general, I think the rule is if you run top, that gives you, it's supposed to make you looser in but tighter off. And if you run bottom, that's supposed to make you tighter in but looser off. So in my experience, I've never had it quite work out exactly that way, but that's the accepted principle. I will say, if you offset them, so if you do like top bottom, that'll give you skew. But if you do bottom top, that'll take out skew. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can find success with that.
I was gonna say, in theory, you'll get the most skew by having a top left side mount and a bottom right. But I have never really noticed enough in terms of how all that works to really say for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can say we've had really good success running it. I know we ran it for Pocono Peak last year and it worked out well, but it doesn't work out at every track.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go on bottom for now, and all that, and so we'll do a run now, another 10, and then I'll talk a little bit about ballast and cross as well. We could probably talk about that while we drive actually as well. You've got what I shared, right?
Yeah, I was just putting the shocks at 32.
Yeah.
Do you want me to lead?
Yeah, it's up to you.
I don't know. Racing and talking about cross and ballast, that might be a hard one to do.
Well,
that's a long convo.
I was gonna say, in terms of ballast, I guess
there's really no right answer.
Yeah, there isn't, because it is okay for some stuff. I want to say there is, like in Cup, we generally run a ton of ballast at fast tracks. And we end up running less for basically short tracks. So for like road courses and stuff, you want the ballast really far back, and kind of shorter tracks, it's somewhere in between. In general, the rule I found is that the faster the track, with the exception of a super speedway because that's a different deal, the more ballast you want to run. And the reason for that is it essentially acts. It's kind of like throwing a dart, where the more weight you've got at the front, the kind of more stability you've got. Like, if you can imagine the spoiler kind of acts like the flights on an arrow, then you might be able to sort of visualize that effect. And we'll be able to show it as well, because we'll do it on the next run. Because this definitely needs more ballast, I think. Roll up on you actually really good.
Yeah, it's me at Chicagoland, man. I need to have a set that really has a lot of drive off, but this one doesn't. You can tell it's under ballast because of the way it rotates center off, where it's just like it's not sliding, it's not driving, so the right rear is just sliding.
31.
Ought to be a rapper at that, Ryan. But when it's just sitting there rotating on a pendulum, like, or just yawing out, nah, it's no good.
Say that, like, I ran you over there. How much does telemetry play into your truck Xfinity and Cup sets?
A lot.
Yeah. What we're trying to do here is kind of give you an idea of the vast majority of things that will get you I want to say 95 to 98% of the way there. And what I mean by that is in terms of just general kind of ranges where you want to be on stuff and what things do. But the last kind of 2%, it comes from... It generally comes from getting the most consistent ride heights on all four corners of the car. So
for as long as possible.
Right. So for things like Cup, especially Cup actually, with how downforce, well, how aero dependent Cup is right now, it seems that keeping the aero consistent is huge, and the best way you can do that is with telemetry by just looking at just ride heights on the splitter and all four corners. Now, we can get around that by using replay and things like that, but you will get to the answer faster using telemetry, I think is the best way of putting it. So we'll try and set the front end of this without using any telemetry, just based on what we kind of know from feel, and hopefully kind of give you some cues as to what you can look for if you're particularly averse to using telemetry. Now, that actually kind of brings about another interesting point about this truck specifically, that in both Cup and Xfinity, what you have now is you have a dual spring arrangement in the front of the car, where you have one mainspring that is always engaged, so the car is kind of always sitting on that, and then you have a secondary spring which you basically land on or start kind of using as the front of the car travels, and you can change when that spring is active based on how much packet you use. With the truck, you can't do that. You just have the mainspring, but you are also allowed to use such a soft spring that the spring will bind, so you can get a similar effect, but it's actually much easier. And in general, what you want to run in the truck is the softest possible. Like, I think you were saying to me that the vast majority of stuff runs 300s, which is minimums, right? And that you only kind of deviate from that if you have to.
You basically just start at 300 and you work your way up from there and run as low as you can. And you primarily want to work it off the left front, because that's arguably the most important corner for aero, because if you don't have your left front, you're not turning, so it's going to really hurt you long run, because everything you do that helps short run speed will like cascade 3 times over long run. So like if you have a really good car, lap 30 feels really good, it means you're probably set up pretty good, at least handling wise. Okay.
Okay, I asked because I get really confused in Motec. Yeah, it is easy to get confused in Motec, but I would say that the best thing you can do is your aim with Motec really is to just do the things that you can't do in the garage, especially if you're starting out. Like, you can do more advanced stuff, but really the goal is to just basically see more information. Like, I get confused most by the spring and shock spring and Xfinity Cup. Yeah, best advice,
we all do.
I was going to say, best advice I can say on that is yes, everybody does. And there are numerous times where that stuff just, you think you got it figured out, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, wrong. A good example of that would be, well, it's mainly a track thing that causes that, I think, because when I go between, say when I go between Kansas and Charlotte, the front spring arrangement that I used for both tracks was completely different, and that mainly came down to the fact that at Kansas it's so flat and smooth that it's kind of easy to get where you need for heights and stuff, whereas at Charlotte it's so rough that the ability of the thing to basically ride over the bumps becomes just as important. And also, I found it difficult to actually get a stiff enough spring in the car for Charlotte to actually hold it up.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that like when you're setting heights, like you can be too low. So like
Yeah.
there's situations where like I guess Chicago even, where in a test session, like before the race, whatever, you can set it so low that like, okay, in a test session it's great. But then you get into the race and all of a sudden you might start feeling some extra bumps, or with a little bit of extra draft, it might push the nose down just a bit too much. So there's a risk versus reward on it in terms of how low you go. So sometimes it is better to leave it up just a little bit extra, like you really won't lose much, just so you can go over the bumps in the race. Because at a place like Chicago, especially with the big bump in the left front off of four, if you
Yeah.
can't get over that bump, you're not going to pass anybody.
Yeah,
And
and
if you're
that's
hitting it, you're going to turn somebody because you're going to hit it and you're going to go straight up the
right.
track.
And that's where I would say that kind of keeping that in mind in terms of weather considerations is really helpful too, because if you're if you're just skimming the track in 111 track temp, you're going to be absolutely destroying the splitter in like a 90 track temp, because you just end up going faster and you'll
Well, yes, but we're working with coil bind sets, so like once
yeah,
it sits
it's
down,
I was gonna
it's
say
it's
it's
not as
actually
bad as like the cup
yeah,
car or anything,
it's not
but
as bad
like
in
you
truck
have to
compared to as
compensate
in
it for a
cup.
little bit. Like
Yeah,
you just have to keep it in mind.
yeah,
But like this truck, like most of the speed comes from getting that nose down as low as you can. So like it's very risk versus rewardy in terms of like, okay, how much can you handle? What's the weather gonna be? But
yeah.
at the end of the day, you still got to handle.
In terms of next stuff to do, like I mean that kind of didn't really show a lot, but it was. I mean, we talked about ballast and stuff,
I
so that
think
was
the
cool.
biggest thing is let's get the springs down.
Okay,
'Cause I mean,
so you reckon just pull them down to 300 straight away and just see what
yeah, I
happens?
mean,
Okay.
we got to get everything working at the right baseline.
In terms of starting heights, do you normally start out at minimum heights or not?
I usually work right around that, yeah.
Okay, so 4, 7, and 6.
The rear heights are more of up in the air, especially maybe with this new build drop, because there's some weird things going on. But like
Yeah.
the rear, I've had good sets at 6, and I've had good sets at 8. In pro field, so like it wasn't, just the open. So I don't know. The rear heights you really got to play around with. There's definitely different ways you can set it up. I mean, it really just comes down to how you like to drive your trucks.
Well, I was gonna say something on rear heights actually. Is that in general, when it comes to front heights, you kind of get to a point where you've got the splitter close to the ground and flat or with whatever angle you want. In general, you don't ever want the left front sticking up. If you want a corner sticking up, it's the right front, or you want it flat. Um, and once you've kind of done that, then everything else is basically um, the rear end to get the handling. And yeah, I unhooked the front bar because I just wanted it out of the way so that I could then basically get the heights 4.7 and 4.7, and then I'll rehook it and I'll. It's just because if you watch, if I click apply now, like it bends all the ride heights and stuff. Which actually brings about another point. I'll go back. I'll click cancel. And we'll go back and I'll talk through this as I do it. Essentially, you see here how there's a split in terms of ride heights, left front to right front of basically a 1/4 inch. Now, in the past, when the camber wasn't so much of an influence, that didn't really matter, and so you could start with a ton of like left right height split in the car. We used to actually start with about 1 inch basically everywhere, especially in cup. But now you're not allowed to have the left front higher than the right front, but you can have it flat, and the flatter you can start the car when it sits down, if it then still sits down flat, you will retain the most camber, and in theory, you will basically be faster. So that's why if you get setups from people, you will see a lot of times where there is no left or right height split in them, and it's because of that
Yeah,
reason.
that's not much of a theory. That's fact.
Yeah.
That is the way to go right now.
So in terms of this, where we've got this split, so what we're gonna do is I'll do it a corner at a time. I'll drop the right front. Now the cross we were at was about 51.7, so that's what I'll try and get back to. Now with this, I kind of know where I'm trying to go, so I'm sort of speeding through it a little bit. But if you kind of want to take it slow, then a nicer way of doing it is to do it one spring at a time, get back to the height you were at, and then do the next spring, get back to the height you were at, and then change from there. So rather than, like, I'll give you an example. So here, if we unhook the bar to start with, and we got 5.262, so we'll take that down to 300, and then we'll go back to 5.262. Or as close to it as we can get. And you can see that we get the cross back to where we were, and all the other heights and everything are back to the same. So then we can go down to 300 on the other side. We'll pull it back up to 5.055. Oh, there you go. And you can see the cross has stayed like basically the same, because the cross is really just based on the ride heights of the car, to a point. Also, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub, and thank you for you guys who are following as well. I appreciate that. I'm sorry I haven't called them out. It's just because we were mid talk, and I didn't want to really interrupt Alice. But you're right. You can see we're back to kind of where we're at 5.0 and 5.27, and the cross is 51.2. Now, when I try and pull these down to 4.75, it's gonna basically break the cross and stuff. So I'll just do it a couple of clicks at a time. But that's okay, because you just make a note of what your cross was, and then we go from there. So like now, the cross is 49.8, but we're at where we want for heights. Also readjust your cambers and toes. And this can be annoying because you end up basically going back and forth like 0.1 of a degree a lot, but hey. Right, so we're where we want for that now. We're going to keep the bar unattached for the moment. And now, to get back to the cross, what we're going to do is we're just going to simultaneously kind of pull up on the left rear and go down on the right rear and then kind of rejig it. You'll see it. It's a bit of a cycle, but I'll try and do it slowly. So like we can see the cross at the top. So if we go up, you see we're now too high there. Then we go back and we do 2 clicks again there. We're too low on that corner now. But you can kind of just go around. You do eventually get back to where you want to be. Right, okay, so you can see we're back at 51.2, and that's kind of what you want to do. Oh, and also reset your truck arm preload. I normally go just basically as close to 0 as I can on that. And now what we'll do is we will... Actually, should we chuck some ballast forward? We keep
I was
talking
just
about
thinking, I mean, usually, I mean, yes, it's probably going to need to go forward, but I don't think it's going to have to go forward as much as it used to, because with this new build, we're not turning as much RPMs, so we don't have as much engine braking.
Okay.
So we might be able to get away with doing more of a cross adjustment than a ballast adjustment, but the ballast can probably go forward for.
Right. I'm gonna shunt the
stabilize
ballast
it.
forward to. I'm gonna go to -12.
I would go to I would just go to 10.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
-12 will work too. 5-inch increments.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, negative. We'll do -12, and then you see you just have to. It should just be 1 click for that. There you go. Now everything is roughly where we want to be. Don't forget to reattach the bar. I cannot tell you the amount of times I forget to reattach the bar and I go out the pits and one of my cars broken. So yeah, don't forget to do that. And here I'm just gonna do. There you go. The one click.
The nice, if you're ever stuck in a testing cycle or whatever, the good thing to know is like ballast is relatively easy to
It
test
is.
compared to crossweight at least. So like you want to have your crossweight set, which is hard to find, but it really just affects the overall balance, short run versus long run, in the simplest terms. But ballast is relatively easy to see, like, oh, this is better or this is not. So
Yeah, the thing I would say with ballast is that it's an adjustment you can make where you don't have to rebuild like everything around it. Like I would say a good way of figuring out where you want to be for ballast is to sort of look at what the range is. So say on the Cup, it's between 0 and 48. If you're completely new to it, put it at 24, and then drive it at 24, and then put it at, like, 36, and then see what the difference is. And then if you like it at 36 more than you did at 24, go to 48 and see what you think. And you will home in quite quickly on what range you want to be in terms of ballast. For the Cup, I would say that in general the ballast doesn't move around a lot at all for high speed tracks. When you find what works, it works basically everywhere. With the truck, I'm less certain. I know you were saying that you move the ballast around a bit, Dallas.
It's a moving target week to week. Like with ballast, there's no right answer, and with crossweight either. You know, I know we had that little phase last year where it was pretty much max everything, but right now, at least with the truck, it's a moving target depending on the track. I mean, I know like the Iowa Pro Race was last night, and we ran way far back ballast and really low cross, but at a mile and a half, we could be up at 10 ballast and 56 cross. So it really just depends on what the track wants.
Basically, yeah. Like I was saying earlier, in general, the shorter the track, so say like a New Hampshire or Martinsville and so on, will require less ballast than a bigger track, say Texas or Charlotte or so on. And that really seems to come down to both a combination of banking and just in general corner speed. Like the bigger the transitions there are, the more ballast you basically need to kind of handle this. Also, I showed you a setup, Dallas, if you want to come out and do it.
All right. Yeah, I mean, once you do it a few times for a few tracks, you kind of get like a range pretty quickly within your first few runs of like, okay, we're within a 3% crossweight range, and ballast is relatively easy to just shove one way or the other and check. So experience helps with it, but
it does.
It's not as intimidating as it looks.
No, and once you
not fun.
Yeah, and once you've done it a couple of times, you get a good idea of where you need to be. In terms of crossweight, a good place to start is 55, and go from there really. Like if you're completely lost, go to 55. But
yeah, I know the way I view crossweight is like I don't really look at entry much with it, because I can do a lot of that with other things. But I look at it as like, okay, I'll run lower crossweight if I want the rear end to basically slide out more on exit, and if I don't want it doing that, then I add cross. So that's how I look at it. I know Christian probably looks at it differently, but however you look at it, as long as it works for you, that's what matters.
Yeah. The thing with cross to remember as well is that the static number in the garage matters, but it's actually the dynamic number, which annoyingly you can't see, that is way more influential. And really what influences the dynamic cross is springs, really. The track bar does matter to an extent, but the primary driver of dynamic cross is basically springs and spring split, especially in the rear of the car. In general, the bigger rear spring split you have, the more your dynamic cross is going to drop down. And that's why you can get that feeling where you drive into the corner and suddenly the rear end like snaps around. Or on exit you can kind of get a similar throttle sensitive behavior like you do with the track bar. I ran you over again there.
This track is hard when you don't have a OP set under you.
You can still see that
I can
there's
tell
a
you
snap
the
on
rear
exit.
springs are
Yeah.
like, this is too much of a split.
I think we fix that next, to be honest. track.
I mean,
pass.
this drive's closer to you than it does to me, so.
Outside. Still outside on your quarter. Still outside.
Yeah.
You're clear here.
Yeah, see, like, I'll try and get on the... That's the other thing, is, like, the car has to drive off the high line with these.
Yeah,
And
the
this does
Highline
not.
and truck is particularly.
I tried to
okay.
get on in there and, like, around, like, lap 4, and it started to go around.
Like, you can kind of see how, like, coming off the corner, it does, like, a little wiggle, like, when you get in the gas, and then it kind of starts sort of shimmying up the track. And in general, that's not a good thing, because the more you can stay hammered down coming off, it's all about exit speed, really. Entry speed doesn't matter near as much as exit speed.
31.88.
Because if it yaws out too much on exit, yeah, if it yaws out too much on exit, then essentially you just start losing the drive off, and that only gets worse. It never gets better. I don't hear it hitting with the nose, do you?
It's not.
The reason I wanted to get out front is because I want to show something with regards to replays and splitter
Oh, that's
for
fine.
ARB ASIM.
32.1.
I don't feel like entry is bad, but I do feel like exit is terrible.
Yeah, that's a very fine line to sit at. Especially that early in the run, so like, if it's that bad now, by lap 30, you're not going to be on the track.
32.19.
Alright. But yeah, in terms of front end stuff, I just want to grab... Let me grab a replay. Like, if you absolutely don't want to use telemetry, this is a way where you can get not a perfect idea of what your heights are, but an idea. And basically what you do is you go to... well, let me go back on this. Right, you go to rear chase camera, and then you press Control and F12. Or you do if your keyboard lets you. And then you can edit the camera, and basically you just want to edit the Z or the Z value depending on where you are in the world. And from this, you can get an idea. It's not perfect, and that is a really key thing to remember. It is not a perfect representation of what it actually looks like, but it is. If you're really adverse to telemetry, you can do this. And basically, you then look at kind of the splitter height through the corner. So like here, really the takeaway from this is that it's sitting down more on the right front and the left front is sticking up. So we can kind of, well, we can fix that one of two ways. Now, I don't know what Dallas's preferred way of doing that is, but you can either allow you can allow more travel on the left front.
You only have one thing you can do right now.
ASIM.
No. You're going to want to go up on the left front spring.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, I pulled it up to see, and, like, I might have cheated a little and just double-checked and see what we're actually at for heights. And the problem with... My best advice for it is to take a little bit of time and learn the Motec, but if you're against it or whatever, maybe... The problem with the replay there is that doesn't show like just how far it is off the ground. Like, like that distance there is actually quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I mean you can
like,
see like properly under the corner, so it's a significant amount.
So basically what you're going for, if you're gonna base it off a replay, you basically want to have the nose in the ground. Like it's gonna look like it's in the ground when it's sealed properly.
Yeah, it's or close enough. At least when you get to that point, then you can kind of make
Yeah, I
it
mean it's gonna look
one
like it's just
changeover.
taking the nose off the whole time.
But in terms of these trucks, it's slightly different than it is in Cup, because basically the 300-pound spring binds the earliest. So by going up on, so if you go up on the left front by say like 20 pounds, what you're actually, it sounds really counterintuitive, but you're actually allowing a little bit more travel before that spring like completely binds up. And I mean, like, what would you go up to? I want to say 320.
Um, well, if I didn't cheat and know the answer, I would say you want to go in 10-pound increments because 10 pounds makes a fairly big difference. I want to say 10 pounds is at least, it's a little bit under a quarter of an inch,
Okay.
but I mean it's like between a tenth and 2/10 of an inch just with 10 pounds. So
So basically, per click of spring at the lowest end, it's essentially 0.2 of an inch.
roughly,
Or, well, you say 0.1.
uh,
0.1 or 0.2?
point 0.15
Okay.
judging. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the way to do it.
I mean,
But
it looks
you usually want to
significantly
go
up to
slow.
me, so that's why I said 320.
Oh, it is
How
significantly up,
how
but
far off am
320
I?
won't be enough.
Oh, okay. How far off is it? It looks like it's about an inch.
It's 3/4 of an inch off at its lowest
Okay.
point.
So you
But
can
like the right
so you
side
can
is
see
fine.
how
So like
right. So you can see how like looking at the replay gets you a rough idea of which way to go, but the
yeah, if you
telemetry
look at the
is
right front on the truck, that's actually like where you want it to be sealed at the end of a run.
yeah.
Like that's not bad for a short run, but like that's not going to stay there by the end of the run. That's going to the right front will look like the left front.
But in
Because
general,
the
you
right
don't
front right
want
now is sat down, but
yeah, you do not
the
want
left front isn't.
this left front corner sticking up.
The thing that you have to be careful about, and I'm not going to say this is necessarily advanced, but with this situation, it could be easy to mistake that for an arm sim problem instead of a spring problem. So there's a couple different ways to go about it. Personally, some people like running arm sim, some people don't
Yeah.
like running arm sim because of what it does
I
to
don't like
certain
running
cars
arm
on
sim.
entry. So like if you're trying to stay low on the arm sim, use as much of the left front spring as you can to keep the to set the nose. But
Dallas, one second, right? You got a question.
sure.
So 3/4 of an inch reckons roughly a 340-pound left front. Do you want to try that and just tell me if that works? Like just real quick.
Well,
And
it's gonna
see.
be like a 370, but yeah, I'll throw it in.
Well, I was gonna say just throw it in, do a lap, and let me know what the actual difference is.
All right.
I'll talk about ASIM a little bit whilst you do that. Right, okay. So as well as having the coil bind spring, which is basically the main driver in this car, in terms of Xfinity and Cup, a big factor is arm asymmetry. And basically what this does is as the front gets loaded up, it essentially kind of jacks the left front down. Or depending on what sort of reference you use, it either jacks the left front down or the right front up. And essentially what happens is the more asim you run, the more it will kind of Jason the more it's going to roll left. But there is a disadvantage to running the higher you go on asim, the higher it starts to force the front up down the straights. So what you'll see is basically if you run no asim, you might struggle to get the thing to sit flat, especially in Cup. Maybe not so much in this, but especially in Cup, you will struggle to get the front to sit flat with no asim. But you will notice that your the difference between your corner heights and your straightaway heights in the front end is going to be much smaller. So there'll be like that much of a difference. If you run max, you'll notice the gap gets even bigger. So in general, in Cup, because of how you're trying to get the car to sit down and to retain as much camber as you can, and because of how high the loads are, max does seem to be where you want to start, especially at big tracks. But if you can work it down, I think it's helpful. In terms of truck, I'll be honest and say I don't really know. Dallas was telling me that you were saying that for here you ran 4 in pro, right? but you don't use.
Let me check.
I can't.
Yeah,
I can't
I
actually
ran
remember.
4.
I was gonna say I can't actually remember which direction you told me, but you said that you either didn't go lower than 4 or you didn't go above 4.
I mean, you never really go lower than 4 right now.
Okay, so that's a
It's
good
just,
reference to go off of.
Like if you go under 4, you're rolling over too much at a mile and a half.
Right. So basically, for mile and a half, start with 4. If you need more, I would say like a flatter mile and a
I would
half like
start with
this.
max. I wouldn't start
Okay,
with 4
fine.
because like you have to work it down to 4.
Yeah, that to be honest is probably sound advice for both for
Like
all 3 cars right now. Just start with max and go from
Yeah.
there.
Any
Like, if
baseline you see is gonna be
it's
max.
probably got max. Yeah. But yeah, in general, the bigger the transition into banking, so again, places like Charlotte and Texas and places like that, is that because the transitions are so severe and the lids are so high, it's really hard to stop it rolling right, so you'll probably end up at max for those. At flatter ones like this and say Homestead, where the transition's much smoother and gradual, you can get away with that. The problem with the truck is the bar is the only thing holding right front up. I don't know for truck, but I know for cup that's definitely
Kind of.
definitely pretty true. And that actually was a
Pretty
change.
close.
Yeah, that was a change that happened maybe I want to say a year to a year and a half ago, where all of a sudden, like, I remember when we were testing for Vegas in the Peak Series, and we were going between non and max ASIM, and the only difference it seemed to make was basically what the driver preferred. I don't remember ever making any speed difference, and then all of a sudden there was this one build where that was like the meta. Like, suddenly ASIM was enormous, and like it was like you had to be max, especially in Cup. So would you run a higher ASIM on places like Martinsville? No,
Opposite.
that's
No,
yeah,
you
that's
run low.
the opposite, because it's flatter and because it's a lot slower. You don't have as much of a problem with it rolling right.
The mile and a
So-
half is where you're gonna be running the most because
Yeah.
you have the most like loads in the corner. Martinsville's flat and you're slower, so not as much natural. The G's aren't pushing the car down.
Basically, yeah. And that comes back again to what I was saying about transitions, and the places with bigger transitions and higher banks will generally need more ASIM. Obviously, road courses you run none, but that's road course. Did you do that lap, by the way?
Yeah, I don't know. We might be learning right along with everyone else.
Why? What was it?
340 was way too low.
Really?
320 is about right.
Okay.
But I think it might be because of the cross.
Yeah, possibly. But should we say, I guess,
320 is pretty close, but
I was actually right at 320. That's cool.
if we're gonna want to properly seal it,
that
we're
is
gonna
a total
want to do
blank. That was an
320 and
absolute guess.
add the 5 arm sim.
Okay.
Or we can do it with preload.
I mean, what are your thoughts on preload?
I like running preload because
Okay.
I like to keep the left front pinned throughout the run.
See, I have an interesting relationship with that zero bar preload. I feel like it really binds the car up to use it, but in the little bit of testing that I've done to try and actually figure out if it does matter, I have generally been faster with it than I have without it. So I actually did math.
Well,
for
see, I think it
For the 340.
comes down to like the long run, like it keeps the nose in place longer. And I think that's really where you lose out if you don't run it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've seen some wicked fast sets with like none, but like I don't know, I've had a lot of success with a lot.
I feel like
you can make either work, but it kind of depends on what you're running, what track you're at. I mean, there's always little weird things that'll happen depending on where you're running.
I mean, honestly, if you prefer setups with preload, that's absolutely fine. Like if I had to say one way or the other, I would say use it. Preload hurts straights more than ASIM does for basically same effect in corner. I don't know about that. If it hang on, are we talking specifically truck? Because if that's specifically truck, then maybe it does. I don't actually know for truck. But for Cup, I can't say I've seen that.
I mean, the thing is, though, is like since it's iRacing, like
Specifically
downforce
truck.
wins
Okay.
everything. But like, if you have to sacrifice ride heights or anything, by the way, though, like I don't know, downforce seems to win over everything, like regardless of straight line speed. I mean,
Yeah.
Christian can say more on it, but like we've had good straight line sets across different classes and shit.
Well,
And
sometimes.
well, right, well at least straight line, you know, like the Le Mans set you ran, whatever. But it didn't matter because we didn't have the downforce.
Oh, okay. So right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that was your username, Langet. If it's you, then you're probably more knowledgeable on this than I am. So I'll definitely take your word for it on it. Especially after how like ridiculously fast you guys were at Coke 600, and I couldn't keep up on long runs. Yeah. So what were we saying? 320 and 5 ASIM. And try that.
Yeah, that'd be pretty close.
I hate it when it says 5.9 instead of 6. It annoys me. So let's just try that straight off. Actually, do we want to change rear springs so it's less horrible to drive?
I mean, I don't know, we might be able to show without changing it how much
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
like a properly sealed nose, what it does for handling too. Like when you don't have the most downforce from the front, you lose a ton of handling too.
Yeah.
Because it's like you got 3 tiers of cars. You got the bad ones, the ones that are fast but can't drive or like can't handle, but then you have ones that do both, and a lot of the top tier cars will have both, which a lot of it comes from sealing the nose extremely well.
I shared it back to you, by the way.
Alright.
Yeah, that I would agree with. But in general, you kind of do see that the fastest cars also tend to be the nicest to drive, which I mean makes sense because it ends up being like a consistency gain as well as just a raw speed gain. Go from there. Did you find S1 build made splitter more important than everything? In terms of what car? Are we talking truck or are we talking cup? Every oval car. I found that, I feel like the splitter heights are super sensitive on cup. I don't know about other stuff. I know in super late models, Dallas focuses on front heights a ton.
Well, all heights really, but I don't know. I haven't personally noticed that change, but I wouldn't say that it's wrong. It wouldn't surprise me. I've always had the same focus on the ride heights, so I've always, like, I don't know if I would have noticed the change. I can see it though.
I definitely want to fix handling.
Yeah, dude, those rear springs are just nasty.
Just loose. Because it's really throttle sensitive.
31.4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better, but
Well, I was just gonna say, in terms of like the cup stuff, I've noticed that before, where like a one click adjustment on Packer used to not really do anything. Like you used to have to make a reasonable swing at it.
31.3.
Suddenly turned into where one Packer now actually makes a noticeable time difference. But I'm not sure if that's just because of stuff being wide open or not. But it definitely seems ultra sensitive to splitter heights. I want to actually try and put 10 down on this to see if we're actually making gains. I feel like we've got to be, but, you know. What I might actually do is I might make up like a really quick Motec sheet and stick it in my Discord that basically just gives you high outputs for this truck so that you'll be able to load up and you'll be able to see if like your splitter's level or not. I feel like that might help people.
31.61.
If this car is loose now, what would happen if Dallas was on my quarter? If it was Cup, I'd probably wreck. With this, the aero effects are not as pronounced. Yeah, which side actually? But in Cup, like, I've noticed that the new stuff is ultra dangerous in like a 3 wide. Because you'll just have moments where you just lose all downforce. I feel like I'm tight on entry, but loose on exit. Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely better.
It's not trying to kill me anymore.
94.
No, not
Like
as
I
much.
can tell the nose is pretty much there.
Having someone on your right rear. You race this more than me. Do you think it matters?
Well, first thing I'd say is it depends on the track. Second thing, I mean,
32.
it's always hard because these things can, like, I'd say these things get pretty loose, as you might be able to see. But, like here, if I'm under someone, like if you have a really good set and you come off really low, it's not too bad. But if you're barely faster and you're under a guy, it's either going to get really tight and you're going to have to back off, or it'll be like Christian said and you'll get loose. But like, I don't know.
Well, Will's saying that
really
in the few truck races he's done, he says he finds it really twitchy when a car sits out there.
Yeah, I can see it. I don't think it's as pronounced as like what you'd see out of like the Cup cars or anything. But
Yeah,
I'd say any type of racing, you know, where you're coming off that fast under a guy, it's gonna have, you know, run the risk of it.
Well, what I'd say for Cup actually, okay, yeah, C fixed. For Cup, I've definitely noticed that if it used to be a case of you could kind of drag the rear somewhat liberally without it being a big deal, but now it feels like if you drag the rear at all, especially if you're up in the pack, instantly dead. Like the thing will just like you'll hear it and then like it's almost like the steering wheel goes completely slack, and the next minute you'll be pointing at the inside, and if you don't figure out what you need to do in that like split second of keeping the thing completely straight, you are probably going straight back up the track and you're going to kill everybody. But just as a quick thing, I want to type up that times just so that you can see that we're actually going somewhere here. I'm going to put timestamps on the adjustments actually, so that you can kind of refer back to that when it goes to an upload. And I'll also put it on the screen in a second. Dallas, you want to kind of talk about where you would go from now in terms of with this?
Well, I'd fix these rear springs. With how loose the truck gets, you pretty much just max out the left rear spring, to get as much drive off as you can for as long as you can. Um, there are other ways to do it, like if you're not at like a true mile and a half, like I'd say homesteads, any flat track, pretty much anything that isn't like hardcore banked, you can get away with pretty much whatever springs you want to run in the rear. I mean, I've ran sets. I think Homestead last year I had less than a 100-pound rear split, but I've also ran races with over 500-pound split. Really just depends on the track and how you want to drive it, how loose you can drive it. I mean, Christian can drive them a lot looser around here than I can. I need to have a fair amount of drive off to really get things done, but typically with the mile and a half bank tracks, especially if it's hot at all, might as well just run 1,000 left rear spring, which is max.
Is that really max?
Yeah. Um, the right rear, you can, I mean, you can pretty much just run like 2,000-pound rear springs and then do all of your rotation off the track bar, and basically over however high the track bar is, there's a lot of your rotation in the rear end, with the springs just being used as drive off. Because I mean, we're fairly high on rear springs, and it's not fun to drive. So
Well, in terms of
that would be where I would go next, is to
well,
get all your springs right.
I was gonna say in terms of right rear spring specifically on the truck, I know kind of the ranges that I use on Cup. It on the Cup stuff, it depends on if you're using the coil bind or not. If you're not using the coil bind, right rear basically anywhere between about for slower tracks. So like
You never go over 2K.
well,
Are you talking Cup car?
I'm talking Cup for a second, but I'll talk about like I'll let you do an input on truck in a second. In terms of Cup, the range really seems to be between like 1250 and like I want to say 2500. I've ran softer than that before, but that like for big tracks, and that's if you're not using a coil bind option. If you're using the coil bind option, that thing like goes all out of the window because you have to use that travel adjuster and so on. But if you're not using a coil bind spring, that's like a I want to say decent isn't really what I mean, but like that's a workable range I think for mile and a halves between 1250, maybe as low as 1,000, but you'll probably struggle to keep it kind of set up. So yeah, I would say between like 1250 and 2500 for a right rear on Cup stuff. At smaller tracks, you can go like say places like Phoenix, Richmond, and so on. I would say kind of 1250 is the high end of that, and that you can go like as low as like 750, maybe even lower. And then what you do once you've got your right rear is basically what controls your ride heights, and then left rear is really kind of what controls the balance. It can end up in a scenario where the right rear does drive the balance, but that is like if you're using insanely high numbers. Like I've seen people use 7K right rear springs in the Cup before. I don't know how or why, but like when you try and drive them, it's literally like you're on a brick in the right rear. It's crazy. In terms of truck, I don't know. What would you say, Dallas? Is a decent range to start in for right rear spring?
Well, see, the thing with right rear is like once you get started on your set, if you don't like switch, like if you build a certain right rear spring into the set, then you're pretty much stuck with that range. So whatever you start with, you're gonna want to kind of like the range that you start with, because once you start building the truck around that spring, like you might as well stay with it, because you'll be able to make 100 pounds either way on whatever you start with, and it really isn't gonna make a huge difference. You really see the difference in the left rear. The right rear, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's important and everything, and you definitely need it. Like
But
I
it is
wouldn't ever
basically
go
just
below
ride
800.
heights, right? Really, it's just a ride
Um,
height control, really.
I mean, yeah, I don't really do much lot with the right rear. It's usually all left rear. Whatever the right rear starts at when I start working on the set for that week is pretty much what it stays at. I do more in the rear end with track bar and left rear, because that's where most of the time is. At least for me, I don't really see the need to work with the right rear a whole lot. I wouldn't ever go below like 800 unless you're at like a really, really short track. You know, if you're at like a Martinsville or a Richmond, you could literally run the minimums and be fast. Just speaking from experience on that. But once you get to mile and a halves and stuff, you're usually up over 800. And the left rear, you pretty much always wanted 1,000. I mean, extreme cases is like Atlanta, where you'd run 1,000 left rear and like 800 right rear, but that's as crazy as you'd get with it.
Well, for this, I was noticing like I didn't actually know that the max in this is 1400 on right rear.
Yeah, and I mean, if for some of the unique tracks like a gateway or something, like you can run a max split because you're only at a 200 minimum left rear and a 1400 right rear. So like at some of those really weird tracks, you can make the weird stuff work too. But in general, you want a fairly tight split.
Would you agree that it's kind of really the spring split that sort of well, it's a combination of spring split and track bar that kind of drives the car?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's very hard to explain that because they technically do the same thing, but like I view springs as more of a exit thing and track bar more of a entry to center thing because like I like to run a higher track bar because it allows me to like get the
It
car
lets it
turned
get kind of
quicker.
pitched in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so like if I'm trying to run a high line, I need to rotate the car quicker than the guy in the bottom so I can get a drive off. So I'll use the spring split as the drive off and whatever if I'm running a 200 split but I'm at softer or stiffer, that just depends on what I'm doing with ride heights. But typically I'll use the spring split itself to drive the car out of the corner, but I'll use the track bar to get it through the corner, if that makes any
Right.
sense.
So you kind of offset the two against each other. You can really really high track bars to get the mid corner turn, but then on the exit you're basically the narrower you run the spring split, the less it's going to want to turn left. So if you've already got a ton of rotation in the middle of the corner, you don't want to get on the gas and then still keep going left. You kind of want it to either go straight or I mean, I don't ever enjoy stuff that starts pulling right. I've driven stuff that pulls right. I don't like it, but maybe if that's kind of what works for you, that might be of interest, and that can come from basically having pretty much even springs, or even at some short tracks, it's not uncommon to see people reverse rear springs. Phoenix, I've ran reverse rear springs a ton because getting off of 4 is always a massive problem. I don't know how that would work in truck, but I've done it in cup. What's he gonna ask? Did you do telemetry of that last run, by the way? Because I'm just looking at it on replay, and I still kind of feel like left front's sticking up a little. It looks better, but it looks like left front's up a touch.
I mean, like the nose is definitely down, but we're missing. I mean, to the really really good sealed sets, we're missing probably a quarter inch on average height.
Okay, so really can be lower then. Would you reckon it's worth going to 330 on the left front?
No, I think with the way the rest of the geometry is set up, that's going to bring it too low. Typically, what I would do in a situation when it's this close is I would start cranking down on the offset because since you're working with a bind coil,
Mm-hmm.
like each time you click that offset, it's like a multiplier.
What
so
if
it
we're
sits
already
down
at
more.
the max on the offset though?
Well, see, that's the tricky part. That's what I've been thinking about. Typically, you could probably this is where the preload would come in, because you could use the preload to crank down the left front. You'd have to pop it back up with the offset, but it would counteract just fine.
Yeah.
But that's where you would get the lower arm sim.
So, but in general though, we could probably say that splitter is not quite as low as it could be, but
It's close.
reasonable.
I mean, like you're not going to see significant problems unless you're really getting into the set.
So, do we want to fix rear end stuff then?
Yes.
So, you reckon? Are you saying 1,000 left rear?
I would say 1,000 left rear.
And you would say that basically everywhere?
For every mile and a half, pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
The only mile and a half I like wouldn't say is like something like Homestead, because that's not as heavily banked.
Yeah.
But like anything you lose from closing up the spring split, you can gain it back with the track bar.
Just in terms of rotation, really.
Right. Because like you'll take the spring split and you'll be able to drive out of the corner. And we're driving off the bottom right now, but in race the high line is almost always king, so you have to be able to drive off of there, which higher speeds, so you got more load,
It
so you have
kind
to
of
be more stable.
on the replay. It kind of looks like our rear heights are up as well. That the skirt's not parallel with the ground.
They probably are up a bit.
Okay, and that's gonna go up more now with that left rear spring. So we should probably keep that in mind. Yeah, this is a car where I would definitely say having the visualization of like the ride heights on Motec and stuff would be helpful. So I will definitely put together like a really simple thing afterwards, which is just going to be one. It's going to be one sheet, and all it's going to have is basically splitter height on it, what your left to right kind of height split is, and then what your front to rear height split is. So rake. So I'll just make it literally as simple as I can, and then hopefully you can just load that into Motec, and that will get you like basically where you need to be for ride heights, going forwards kind of thing. So I'll put that together, and I'll probably stick that in Discord, and I might even attach it to the forum thread too. So, but if people have any questions about that, or actually if people have more questions about Motec and stuff, I can try and answer those, or I could try and put together like sheets and stuff that'll be helpful for you. So just let me know on that. But in terms of right rear spring, see this is where I would be kind of, because that's a 250 pound spring change on the left rear, right? So something that I find interesting to do is to look at like the percentage split between like what you have and then what you're going to. So in this case, it's like we started with 750 and 1050. Also calculate is great. So I don't know if you can see that on screen, but basically the left rear spring is like 72% as stiff as the right rear. Now that sometimes I work around this trying to get like an idea of what difference I want for spring splits. Like if you're using linear springs like this is, then you can do that. If it's coil bind stuff, you can't, just because of how coil bind works. But so we're gonna go from like a 72% split to, what did you say, 1,000? So basically like 95. So closing up the split by pretty much like 23-24%. So that's pretty significant. So this should handle a lot tighter, I would think. But keep the right rear the same, you reckon, Dallas?
Yeah.
Okay. I shared it back to you, by the way, with the height change. Go again. And yeah, if people have more questions, we can definitely keep trying to answer them. But this is mainly as a balance change more than a raw speed kind of thing. Will there be an Xfinity or Cup car class? Xfinity, I don't know, because I might try and do kind of what we did with this and enlist somebody for Xfinity who knows more about it than I do. For Cup, I could probably do it, and yeah, I will put a Cup one out at some point. I don't know when. It won't be the next one. To be honest, I'm missing something in Cup right now, and I kind of don't want to do a guide on Cup until I basically know what that is. Okay, this is way tighter. Definitely have to peak. Yeah, for Cup, I guess we'll see where we are on Tuesday, and if I'm closer, or I feel like I'm more on point, then I might start thinking about doing the Cup on sooner. But Cup is definitely something I don't want to get to Cup until I'm sure I can do it like properly. It's better.
31.31.
It still does a bit of a shimmy off the corner. It definitely feels more nailed down than it was. With regards to track bar, where do you kind of think we should be on that? I feel like the 4-inch skew split might not be necessarily
it'll work.
worth it. Okay.
31.4.
You want to run it as high as you can, really. But you can always get away with the max split.
Well, see, the times that I've messed with the truck, something that's always kind of seemed interesting to me is that I found that this thing is a lot. Well, I don't want to say the Cup Car isn't sensitive to track bar changes because it is, but this thing feels extremely picky about track bar heights.
31.64.
Like, if you just got slightly too much split, it feels like the thing just basically is death. Also, hey Carla, what's going on?
Yeah.
You're getting faster now that the thing actually handles somewhat like what you used to. I'm not able to pull away anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know what it's supposed to drive like. It's what I practiced for a bunch, so.
I'm hoping that you can kind of visually see that the drive off was much better. There is less kind of on throttle time in the center just because it's a bit tighter. But in the long run, it'll be more than made up for by how much more drive it is off the corner. I do feel pretty tight now, though.
That's not a bad thing.
Okay, fine. See, that is something worth noting, that pretty much all the oval cars now, they go through a bit of a phase after, say, about 5 laps where they get tight. And then, I want to say they start freeing up from about, like, lap 15 onwards. You think that's fair? Say that?
Yeah.
So next adjustment would be a balance adjustment. I think if I was looking at telemetry, the next thing I would look at is probably rear heights. Like, I feel like we must be kind of high on them.
Yeah, but it doesn't make the difference that you might expect.
Okay.
The truck is fairly numb to rear height changes.
This is 10, so I'm gonna pull off. That's another interesting topic, right? Yes. As Dallas was saying, if the truck is somewhat insensitive to that, in terms of other stuff, rake is basically everything in like GT cars, like absolute. In terms of say other things like cup and so on, I feel like rake is more of an influence in cup than it is in trucks. Don't know about Xfinity. I feel like it's probably we're kind of slotting in the middle. Let's see what that adds up to. See, that's probably going to work out slightly slower just because it's tighter, but it might work out faster in the long run. But we'll see afterwards. Where are we at? 37 minutes. But would you say it's fair to say, Dallas, that the like 95% of the raw speed in these things really comes from aero? Well, okay, aero and the
Front
camber.
arrow.
Assuming the camber is basically like
Front arrow. I wouldn't say
Okay.
rear arrow. Just because I haven't been able to really hone in on anything rear arrow related. It just seems very inconsistent on whether or not it's going to help the car or not.
right.
In theory, it should help a bunch compared to some of the things I've raced, but it doesn't always. But I mean, the way the car drove there, that's not like too tight by any means. Because once you get to like lap 30 or so, like it you'll want to be that tight early.
I feel like I edited my times wrong. No, I haven't.
Do you want to touch on tape at all? Because we're like really far down.
Yeah. In terms of tape,
Keep in mind the new engine model.
1 second here. Let me just get this up on screen so people see this. Right. Okay. So you can kind of see how like my initial laps were faster, and that was basically because it felt more nailed down right at the beginning. I could just basically lean on the gas, and then it kind of got it was running a little slower, but it's a little slower because it's tighter. I think what we had before with the bigger spring split, even though it's fast at 10, is not going to be fast like beyond 10.
If you go to 20, that's like
Yeah,
probably
you're
a 2
gonna
to 3
you're gonna
tenth
be
difference.
too loose. And really, I would say in terms of getting the spring split, and cross weight. Well, spring split, I'm screwing up. Spring split, cross weight, and ballast are like 3 of the main things that you basically use this timesheet to find, because there's really no direct way of going, okay, I know I need exactly this. Like, it comes down to how you want to drive, and also how long you intend for your runs to be, and then beyond that is kind of track. So really, like that's honestly what I spend like the majority of time doing, but like timesheets and looking at where it's fast and whatnot, and trying to balance the car in terms of like where you want to be fast in the run, whether you want to be super fast at the beginning or like super fast long, and so on. So that's where this timesheet really helps out. In pro, I started off a little loose and got tighter. See, that's interesting to me. I have never had that happen, but I have never had that happen in Cup. I don't know, Dallas, have you had that happen?
So you're talking about? Well, I mean that was Iowa.
What, you got tighter as the run went on?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Because in Cup, what happens now is you have the first couple of laps where you're basically wide open, and then after that it gets mad tight, like completely, like to the point where you think basically like it's so tight it's ridiculous, and then it starts freeing up from there, and it gets freer and freer and freer all the way out to like lap 30, I want to say, before it then kind of flattens out. So
When I ran pro here at Chicago, I went from like just like full flat out to fairly tight, and I did most of my testing in like 117 track. But by the end of the run, like it was like where you would manage it with the throttle and then just keep the wheel straight.
uh-huh.
So like by lap 16 or 17, it was pretty much where it was going to be at the rest of the run.
Right. Yeah, in terms of tape, is it the same on... Okay, in terms of tape for Cup, when you get to... Anyway, thank you for the gift sub, crowd. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving it to Jason as well. In terms of tape for Cup, basically you will start to overheat at 284 oil temp, and it's always the oil you want to watch out for, really. You generally never end up running tape high enough that water is a problem. Even at super speedways, it's always oil that's the issue. And so in Cup it's 284. What we used to do on the old package is we would aim for 275 in testing. And actually, this is another thing I can add to a Motec file, where basically I have a tab where you can just look through and you can see how the temps build. in terms of truck, it used to be that 275 was the point where it started overheating. I don't know if that's still the same. Like, do you think it is, Dallas? It probably is. I don't think it
For the
changed.
truck, you want to
Yeah.
aim for like 265 to
Right, yeah.
268
In
testing.
solo, yeah. So in solo, basically 10 degrees colder than you. Well, it's an approximate 10 degrees in traffic. Not so much for Cup, because in Cup now you can sit so close to people that basically even if you're running like 20% tape, you're going to overheat. So Cup is a different beast, but in terms of truck and Xfinity, I would say shoot for 10 under. So shoot for a kind of temps of 265, like, well, yeah, 265, yeah.
That's about what I go for.
Yeah, so 265. With a kind of idea that you're going to be 10 hotter. And on this new engine, because the RPM is like it seems that in iRacing RPM is massive in terms of temperatures. So because this turns like what 800 to 1,000 RPM lower, you can run more tape.
The limiter's 79.
Right, and it used to be like near 9, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So where were we at for oil? If you got
like 230.
Okay.
You could probably go straight up to 50.
I was gonna say in terms of
50 will still be cool.
In terms of tape, it's roughly. Yeah, I used to know exactly what it was. Like in Cup, it used to be that one piece was roughly equivalent to like 2.5 Fahrenheit. I don't know if it's the same in truck. So what do you say we were 230? So.
Not even really.
So yeah, so if we do like, if we say we're 35 degrees away from target and it's 2.5 per thing, we can technically add like 14 pieces of tape. So we could go all the way to 54. But that would be pushing it. I definitely think 50 though. But I'll try and make up a simplified Motec sheet for this. That should help out. Also, thank you for you guys following. Appreciate it. 242 now. So if we got the 10% on tape to 250. Do you reckon there's anything else we should look at? I kind of feel like I would want to be freer on it.
I mean, we're probably going to need a up the cross for long run.
You think?
Or too loose short run. Yeah, like this will probably die long run.
See, for me, like what?
Unless the track bar saves it.
Well, what I look for in rear tire temps is to try and get them equal to each other. But the thing is that 10 laps is honestly not long enough to really get this information. But to me, it actually kind of looks overcrossed because my left rear is way hotter than my right rear. By like 14 degrees, but I should probably do a long run to check. But you think the cross is too low?
Well, I mean, I guess it could have changed with the new build update. I haven't done any like super long testing with
because I feel
the
like
mile and a half
I
here,
feel
but...
like just looking at that, I feel like it's too high. But
well, what if you add cross and up the track bar though?
Hang on, Dustin's saying something. Let me read this out to you. I've broken all my
Okay, so that's more than just an Iowa thing?
It says,
okay,
he says, I don't know if Dallas has run on intermediate since update, but new truck is a bit different as far as what it does over a run now. It used to get mega loose after 20, now it seems to just get tighter and tighter till 20 to 25, then stabilize.
Okay, well, hopefully it's not as loose as Iowa all the time then too, but okay. Well,
Intriguing. It sounds like further investigation will be necessary on Dallas's part for this.
Evidently. I don't know. I still think that little arrow update they did mess with things.
I do agree with
it.
I do agree with him on this, that I feel like that arrow update has kind of made stuff a bit weird with this thing especially.
Yeah,
watching the pro race last night, it seemed like people were spinning out unexpectedly.
Well, it sounded like, or it felt like they moved most of the downforce rearward. So like when you'd lose it at Iowa, it would just all dump off at once, and then you're
kind of like Cup really. Yeah, he's saying personally for us, we only did Texas since update, and same set just got tighter overrun compared to pre-patch. And then
Yeah, no, I believe it.
And then
That
Garrison's
would make sense
saying,
for Iowa.
I
then.
feel like it definitely builds tight now. The truck is opposite of what it has been. Yeah, the aero balance has definitely moved.
But see, like, that's the thing, Linger. Like, that's what it feels like, but I don't think it's supposed to do that. Because, like, if I guess I don't know if you were around, but like a year and a half ago, they made a similar update, but they said that they fixed the arrow because it was too far rearward. So it literally feels the same way as it did before when they said the arrow was wrong on it. So I don't know what they're doing, or if it's supposed to be correct now or what, because they didn't say exactly what they did. They just said that there was
They
a
just
change.
said, yeah, they did just say it was changed, didn't they?
I mean, I know Chicagoland, we're going around here about 4/10 slower than what we were pre-patch or pre-build, so
Yeah, I
it would make
did
sense
feel
because
like
it
this was
feels like the
slow.
nose turns less.
It did to me feel like this was slow. Like when I did some laps on fixed.
Oh,
Uh,
well, pre-build, on my pro set, I was doing flat out 2 laps and 117 track.
okay, yeah, there's no way we're doing that now.
Right.
Hold on. He says, I personally think something was broken in an old build that got changed with the new truck update, and they didn't actually know it changed. Yeah, I can see that. But in terms of what we want to do from here, because what we've probably got is we've got probably time to do one more adjustment, and then I want to get a 120 in before the end of the session, where I'm gonna put you on this, and I'm gonna go on fixed, and we're gonna show the difference. So what do you reckon to change?
Well,
Because for me, I feel like it's too tight.
I don't know. Kind of took all the wind out of my sails now. It's completely like opposite.
Well, okay, I'm gonna drop cross down to 50, and we're just gonna go from there. Maybe not 50. What's the most crucial change to make right now? I would say, in terms of the things that we haven't looked at enough, I would say we haven't looked at ballast enough, and we haven't looked at track bar enough, is where I would say on this setup. And I think I've also just broken it completely.
I think the biggest thing right now though is like it needs a 30. Like ideally, this is when you would do a 30 and really see where you're at over the course of a run. Especially now that it seems like things have changed pretty drastically in terms of what these things want. Because I don't know, maybe they made a small geometry change too. Because before the patch, to actually properly seal this car, you would have needed an extra 50 pounds in the left front, which obviously isn't needed anymore. So
Well, this is a fairly
things are
significant
definitely a little
change,
bit different.
So I'm gonna go out on this and see if this works. It's basically a % less cross. Just because I just want to make sure that we've got enough time to get in that last 20, because I want to show the difference. So when we do it, Dallas, please don't crash.
What? I've been practicing for a year and a half on that. I mean, the last thing we drove on was relatively stable, so
Yeah.
and it was getting better long run.
Well, you keep that, and then I'll run 10 on this just to see. In fact, I might not actually have time for 10. But yeah, in terms of things I think that we haven't looked at enough over this is basically ballast position. We only made one change to it. Cross weight and track bars.
The trickiest thing is they all work in tandem.
I think I'm loosening this up too much.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, if every week is going to be like setting up for Iowa, where it would just build tighter and tighter,
we basically have to
do
wrecking starting out.
Exactly. There are some things you can do to alleviate that, and like my Iowa set, like it kind of had the same phase, but I was only loose for like 1 lap, and then I was fairly neutral in terms of rotation the entire run. I didn't really get to show it much last night because it wasn't exactly a great race, but like you can kind of work around it from what I noticed at Iowa, but I don't know if that's gonna work for a place like this with higher speeds.
See, I just thought that we're pulling that left rear up so much that like the dynamic cross would have gone up a ton. But
31.4.
what's nice is that at least in this, the static cross seems to have some kind of power as an adjustment mechanism. In the Cup right now, I feel like static cross has next to no adjustment power. Like it just doesn't feel like it does anything unless you move it in like increments of like 5%. But I think I want to make sure we get those less 20 in. So I think you run that one that we just had, and let's go out now. I'll put fixed in, and you can run that one.
Okay.
Also, can you make sure before the end of the session you don't leave without sending me that setup?
I'll send it to you right now.
Okay, cool. Just because I need to save it, because I've realized I've not been saving it. But I'm gonna tape the fixed up to 50 just so that we're on the same thing, and I'm gonna follow him, and hopefully you'll see the difference in terms of how much faster that now is. So yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've perhaps not covered as much as I would have liked. But I hope that kind of just listening to it and maybe seeing and the conversations. I feel like the conversations are actually perhaps more valuable than the outright adjustments, if that makes sense. And I was really curious to see if people would like this kind of two-person team sort of delivery of it. So if you guys like this, then I'll definitely try and do this more going forwards, where I'll try and reach out to somebody. Because for certain things like the LMP1 car and so on, that I would really like to do, I just don't know enough about them to kind of confidently do a guide. Sweet. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. Well, I'll definitely try and get kind of a few people on here. I don't know how much Dallas would be down for doing some more stuff. Guess it would depend on the car.
Vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah, also if anybody like in the chat is like down to be involved, then let me know as well. Like if you've got a specific car where, okay, for example, Dirt is like, I like driving it, but in terms of knowledge, in terms of setup and so on, I just don't have it to do it confidently. So if anybody is willing to kind of do one of these on a Wednesday night, just let me know. And yeah, I've enjoyed doing this with the two-person discussion. You're actually not pulling me near as much as I was hoping.
31.5.
It's because it's set up to last more than 10 laps.
True. I mean, it's not like I'm catching you.
31.57.
And now I have no rear tires. It took 5 laps to run out of rear tires completely unfixed.
31.87.
Full mash, baby. I forgot. Muscle memory.
31.
Yeah, I mean, as a driving point of view, you definitely would cut the apron off at this track. It's just, it's hard to get, like, repeatedly the same cut. Like, exactly the same, so I prefer when I'm testing stuff not to do it. Although, to be honest, at certain tracks where you have to cut the apron, like, say Phoenix and so on,
32.0.
then you should definitely you should definitely build your setup around practicing that, because if you don't, you might find you've got some very interesting problems the first time you try and cut it. I'm honestly holding on surprisingly well. Like, you are creeping away from me.
It's gonna get bigger though. Watch.
3.
I would still
you're
take that
set
advantage.
for the
though.
Iowa race last night already. You got 10 laps of speed.
Crazy voice, yeah. I think the difference is coming soon. Yeah, so do I. Because that first run I did on the fixed, because I always try and do a decently long run before I start the stream,
32.
so that I don't waste people's time by basically like making mistakes and sliding off and so on. And yeah, I remember after 15, this is genuinely challenging to drive. Yeah, now we're getting big time warp. Just tell you you're not working hard enough to be fast. I don't know about that. Like for example, this right here. Like I would say that Dallas is my equal in terms of like driving ability. And we know from runs that we've done together on the same setup and stuff that we will stay basically glued together as a pair. We might like separate out a little bit at different parts of the runs, but in general our like total run times end up being pretty damn similar.
We'll just finish side by side in a race.
Yeah. We did a what was it, like 130 lap race or something, and literally it went green the entire distance, including pit stops and everything, and we crossed the line side by side. So yeah, we're pretty close to each other. So like in this scenario here, like, okay, I made a couple of little mistakes and so on, like coming off of that corner there, but this is all set up. Like, nothing I can do with this right now is going to make up that 2-second deficit he's now built. So I would say more so on oval, perhaps. Dallas will probably disagree, but more so on oval, I think the setup is under the divider at the pointy end compared with road.
Why wouldn't I agree?
'Cause you've said before how you feel like we're lacking on road setups sometimes.
It's because we are. But I mean, like, you definitely don't want to underestimate how much the driver means, you know. Like driver
Yeah.
still is like huge on oval no matter what.
I was gonna say, I would say that a good way of getting better is really again to use the timesheet and just do consistent runs and do it on something like this where this thing is hard. So if you do, I don't know, say
32.
do like a 30 lap run a night on the fixed setup somewhere, and just always make sure you do the same weather and stuff, and add them up. I guarantee you that you will get better like the more you do it. Odd question, but do you know how to set up Indy cars? No, is the honest answer to that. I feel like in terms of springs and so on, they're not going to be that different to what we do in Cup. Well, or any other oval, really. I do know and have good relationships with people who do build them, though. So, if there is a desire for an IndyCar setup stream, I could reach out to somebody on that score. I don't think I'm catching you, am I? You're actually almost out of shot now on the corners.
33.18.
I'm trying to get into IndyCar road racing, but I don't know what I'm doing with setups. It's overwhelming. My advice to you on that, from what I've been told, is start with like really high downforce. So max out like all the rear wing, and then use the front wing to get balance, and then try and build your spring package and stuff around that. All the other normal road racing stuff applies in terms of setups. So rake is a huge thing. Like getting your cambers right is a huge thing. Air pressures, I'm pretty sure again you want to be down at minimums on it. So that's what I would say. It's a high downforce everywhere. That's 20, but we've got time. Okay, we've got time for 2 more laps. So I guess we're kind of done.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind is like, okay, it's 4 seconds and 20 laps, right?
Yeah.
But in a race situation, that might as well be the entire field passing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, these things are going a lot slower. Jeez.
They feel slow. Like they feel
117 track, my 30 was a 32.7.
Did you share me
Or
that setup?
32.6.
You did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Also need to watch ride heights around places like Detroit because bumps. But yeah, I'm actually I'm doing a race in the IndyCar, but I didn't make the setup or anything. I got it from Kinetic and by extension the Team Talent guys again. And yeah, the bumps at Detroit are absolutely horrendous. I'm hoping that last run we did though will illustrate how much, like, well, I guess maybe how important drive off is, because that's really what I feel like we gained. Like we gained raw speed with I think better ride height, better cambers and that. But there wasn't. I mean, there's not a lot. Like if you look at the fix, like the fix was already at like 5.8 and stuff. So.
Yeah, no, I mean
It's really honestly was balance is where we gained all that
I got
speed.
a little bit loose, but like it started to calm down after it kind of broke out of the initial loose phase. So
Yeah.
I mean, for what we did, I mean that was fairly good drive.
Yeah, it felt pretty good to me, to be I'm gonna take your times and put them in next to call it, just to add up to kind of finalize that. Oh, did I accidentally? Damn it! I deleted out those times. 1 second. I've made a major screw up. Copy. I inadvertently deleted the other 10 laps of my first fix setup run. And I feel like that was 1 hour, 37-minute adjustments. Hope. I personally am a huge NASCAR oval side guy. I also feel setups hold me back so much. I try to read and test so much, but can never get the setups right. Currently, iRacing is 3,500. The stream is very helpful. Well, I'm glad that you find the stream really helpful. What are you aiming to do in terms of the oval side stuff? Like, are you looking to try and get to kind of like top split stuff and then have a go at like Road to Pro and so on? Absolutely. I would definitely say that if that's what you're trying to do, then I know I'm kind of trying to like show like a way of trying to figure out what you need to do for setups and so on. But yep, I would definitely agree with that. The fixed racing is the way. I know a lot of people like rag on fixed and they're like, oh, but they drive bad on all this and that. Yeah, they do, and that's exactly why you should do it. Because sometimes they'll be like that, where it's just loose, and you'll have to learn how to manage the throttle and so on to basically be able to still drive at the end of a run. Sometimes it's going to be insanely tight, and you'll end up having to do the opposite. Fixed forces you to learn how to drive. And with fixed, you don't have that mental sort of thing that you're getting beaten by setups. Like, if you're getting beaten in fixed racing, you're getting beaten because the guy's simply just doing a better job. So I came from fixed. Like, I did basically a year's worth of fixed setup racing in NIS. And then I moved into trying to do NIS Open the following year. And it does help to alternate between the two a little bit, because I found that when I went to do Open, I did that. Like, I did that whole thing. I was like, I'm getting beat because like everybody's setups are better than mine, and so on. I'm like, yeah, true, but it's not like, it's not everyone, if that makes sense. Like, when you then do a race on a fixed setup versus the same guy who's beating you in Open, and like, if you then beat him and you beat him convincingly, then yes, you can go, yep, I got to work on my setups. If the race is close and like it kind of goes either way, then again you can probably go, okay, my driving's like pretty on point. If he blows you out in fixed the same way he did in Open, then you need to work on like just the pure driving. But fixed is really good. Like I say, I know a lot of people are like rag on fixed and that, but fixed is awesome. Fixed is the way to figuring out what you need to do in terms of driving. And save replays and stuff. Save replays, watch them back, look at what people are doing, look at what their lap times are, look at how they're entering the, like, there is so much time to be gained by entering and exiting the pits better. Like, you look at you look at Peak Series races, you watch Ray can have the worst car in the field and be like 5 seconds behind you. You come out of the pits and he's right there. And I'm like, like always, like it just happens. It's what the guy does, and it's things like that where that ability of being good in those places, in places where setups don't help you, is is what gets is what when you're having a bad setup day is what gets you, like it keeps you in the game basically.
I don't know, I'd say if driving wise, one thing you didn't mention is like if you ever have the opportunity to run against a black stripe guy or anybody that like you know is like legitimately fast, do it because I mean running against Christian has been the greatest help to my pace. Period. Like you can't really beat it. Like I'm a little bit lucky because I'm on the same team, so I get to run against them, whatever. But like any opportunity you get to run against one of the big like black strip guys or anybody they know that's really fast, always take that opportunity to run against them. Even if you get absolutely blown away the first few times, just keep at it because you're better off learning and like trying to follow those guys than you are anybody else, and it helps a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Where like I got to a point where I want to say in I think 2015, 15 or 16. It must have been 16 actually thinking about it because it would have been when I was doing open setups where I had this thing where in NIS Open I was literally finishing 8th every single week. And I'm finishing 8th every single time. Like, what do I need to do? And at the time I was like completely like, oh, it's setups. It's always setups. Like, oh, I'm down. Like, these guys just got better stuff than me. And I joined one up with Tyler Hudson and Marcus Richardson and Derek Bordeaux, right? And I remember the first like week of joining that team, and when I ran against those guys, we were practicing for Texas for Road to Pro, right? And I got beat like convincingly, like every 30 lap run we did and stuff. Like I got beat, just like like okay, I'm gonna say absolutely hammered because to me like falling off the back of a line is I'm getting destroyed, but like it was enough to looking at it be like yeah I'm on the same stuff as they are. I need to do better here. Because it was like maybe 1-2 seconds over like a 30 lap run, which you think is like, oh, that's not a lot. But like to me, I was like, oh no, this is like it was like the worst thing ever. Like it had to be solved immediately. And yeah, it's like Dallas said, like the only way I knew that was because I was running on the exact same thing as those guys, and we were doing all these runs. And yeah, eventually, you crawl up and you get to that point where if you can, you match them. And then it is absolutely the best feeling ever when you actually beat them for the first time over a 30 lap run. Like, I really can't
Yeah.
explain it. Like, how, like, literally, if I ever have to race Tyler Hudson, it is like absolute dread because of the sheer number of times the guy has beaten me in basically everything we've raced ever. Um, and now it's like, if I have to race the guy and I beat him, it's like, yeah, it's awesome. Because I don't know, he's definitely beaten me way more times than I've beaten him. But
I
it
mean,
absolutely helps. Absolutely helps.
just the mindset of like not instantly blaming the setup, regardless if it's true or not. If you always just assume that your driving either needs to be or can be better, then that's really how
Yeah.
you time proof your driving. Is if you
Yeah.
always just assume you need to be better driving, then you're setting yourself up for a lot of success down the road.
Yeah. But I would definitely second what Dallas was saying though. If you can get in with guys who are willing to kind of help build you up and so on, then you definitely I think it's definitely worth doing. Oh, and sorry, I haven't got to that question. Another weird question. I'm stuck at 5.1k I rating. That's fairly high, by the way. I can never seem to get over the hump. Any tips? Uh, are you running like Garrison? Are you running open or are you running fixed? You say you're running. Okay, you say you're running fixed earlier, right? Really, what we said. If you get to that point where you feel like you're plateauing out, reach out to people. If you've got friends and teams and so on, and they're willing to take people, reach out to them. Try and get so even if you can just run against them. People are always looking for people who can one do consistent test runs, without like stacking the car or being like just all over the place, and two people who will like stick with it. And if you can prove that you will do both of that, like you're not gonna run with them for a week and then jump to another team, then you will find people who are willing to help you out and who will basically work with you to make you better, because you running test laps and stuff is gonna make everybody on that team better. And one last question from Jason. Are you okay, I have to say this right. Are you all running a third gear set at Richmond in Super Late Models?
That's
Yes.
classified, Jason.
That is not classified. We run third gear setups everywhere. I'm not even lying. Third
That's
gear
actually
setups
not
everywhere.
true.
Did we not? Did we run a?
No, we do not.
Oh, we ran a second gear setup somewhere.
Yeah, we ran
Yeah,
a
we
fourth
did.
gear set somewhere.
Did we? By the way, good stream. Really a lot of good info by you and Dallas in this one. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've enjoyed doing this a lot, actually. I'm glad that people have found it good. I actually should probably wrap this up because I was meaning to actually do something else once this finished. But yeah, I'm glad that everybody enjoyed it, and I think definitely this is the highest viewership we've ever had for this. Hey, thank you for the Twitch Prime. I appreciate it. It's funny. Like I had a decent number of, well, I say decent number of subs because like any subs is kind of awesome because I'm really honestly doing this just because I enjoy the streaming. I enjoy trying to help people out and so on. So any kind of subs and so on from that is cool, just on the basis of like it's like I kind of see it as like a that you guys find value in what I'm doing and so on. So that's cool. But we had a massive like influx of subs. I say massive, but it's not massive compared with most people. But it was a decent number of subs for like the Indy 500 races and so on. And that was like a month ago, and literally my subs went like, I think we were as high as 17, and that counter there that says we're at 16, that is wrong because I have to update that manually, like every time people drop off. And I think yesterday it went all the way down to 5, and I looked at it and I was like, what has happened? But I guess that just happens, and that happens because obviously it changed schedule and so on. So I'm glad that people find that there's enough value in this to actually sub to it. Yeah, even Prime. I know obviously Prime, like you get it as an addition, but it's still cool. I still appreciate it, and I still get some money from it. So thank you guys for that. And yeah, if people like the dual stream, if anybody watching is a particular specialist in a certain car and would like to do a stream with me, please reach out. Let me know. I'd be really keen to do that. And yeah, we'll try and get another one in 2 weeks' time. I'm not sure what we'll do. It might be a road car. There's a couple of things I guess I'll work on. Like I say, I know a couple of guys who run IndyCar, a couple of guys who run LMP1. I might try and reach out to, well, I say I will reach out to those and try and see if they're interested in doing that. And if they are, we'll try and figure something out. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And I will get all this info up on Discord and everything, and put the setup up and everything. Yeah, thank you again.